Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio Lunchtime Talk. These talks are live every Friday at 1 p.m, both here in the building and live online. Hello, online people. So whether you're in Bristol or you're far away, you can join in the conversation. My name is Martin O'Leary. I am the studio community lead here. I'm a white man in my 40s with long hair and a beard, wearing a chunky red knit today. Every Friday, we throw open the doors of the Pervasive Media Studio for Open Studio Friday. We offer you the chance to spend some time in our space, hot desk alongside our residents and staff from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So especially big welcome to those of you who are new to the studio. Can anyone who's new to the studio put your hand up? Oh, we got a few. Oh, yeah, quite a few. All right, well, this bit is for you. What is the Pervasive Media Studio? We're a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology, everything from comedy to coding, product development to performance art. And we're a partnership between Watershed, where we are right now, the University of the West of England, the University of Bristol, and we're funded by Arts Council England. And what we do is we offer studio space, desks, meeting rooms, events, and opportunities, all for free to our residents as part of a spirit of generosity and mutual exchange, is what it says on here. And we're a space for people to take risks with ideas and to make time for collaboration. So a quick bit of housekeeping, please do feel free to move around, make a cup of tea. There's a kitchen back here, sort of, if you walk back out of the space and to your left a bit. We have a quiet space just through this wall to my left, to your right, just around the corner. If you need to take a break at any point, just pop around the corner. There are fire exits at either end of the studio. We are not expecting a fire alarm today. If it happens, that's probably real. The studio team will direct you, but they are at the other end of the studio on either end. And there are accessible toilets and baby change, which are in the corridor back next to the kitchen. So if you go back out of the space and turn left, there's a little corridor there with accessible toilets and baby change. Don't see a baby this week, but you never know. Yeah. So there will be a Q&A at the end of this talk. And for those of you who are watching online, you can pop your questions into the YouTube chat. Emma will be your voice in the room today. If you're in the building, then just stick your hand in the air. I will send a microphone around. You can get news on all of our future talks by going to watershed.co.uk/studio, at PM Studio UK on Twitter, or X if you want to call it that, at Pervasive Media Studio at mastodon.social on Mastodon, or at Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram. All right, our speaker for today is Holly Thomas. Holly is a dance artist, choreographer, and studio resident, creating inclusive choreography and embodied audio description for dance. Drawing on her lived experience of visual impairment, Holly's work decenters the visual and invites performers and audience to engage with dance as a felt, sonic, and imagined experience. Today, she's going to be talking about her R&D project, Half Light, taking audiences on a journey through the shifting sensory landscapes of twilight, absolute night, and sonic sunrise. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Holly.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Martin, and thank you all for coming along on this Friday lunchtime. It's really lovely to see you all. So as Martin said, I'm Holly. I am the artistic lead for Half Light. I am a white woman in my late 40s. I've got shoulder-length brown hair. I'm wearing my most favourite green dungarees and a cream cardigan. I am a little bit nervous, so you might hear a waver in my voice. Hopefully that will go as I get into my stride. So yeah, I just wanted to say something about access in the space before we start today. So it is a relaxed space here. There are some beanbags at the front. If anybody would like to sit on those, you're very welcome to. Do what you need to feel welcome and comfortable. If you need to move around, to stim, to rest, to knit, or to take a break, then please do. In the words of the rather brilliant Alison Kafer, for me, this way of us occupying space together is not distracting, but it feels like a radical claiming of accessible spaces. So yeah, please do let me know as well if I start talking too quickly, or if like my volume drops. I have a little bit of a tendency to speak quietly, so yeah, please let me know. As Martin mentioned, I'm visually impaired myself. So what that means for us today is that if there's something you need to let me know, if you can voice that, rather than gesturing, then I'm more likely to respond and know what it is that you need. Okay, so just checking now, is my voice volume okay?
Yes,
Can everyone hear
fine.
okay?
Yes, it's fine.
Great, lovely. And as I say, just let me know if I need to raise it at any point. Okay, so behind me is a large screen on which I'll be sharing some visual information. Currently, there's an image of a colour photograph on a soft yellow background. The photograph is taken in close-up in a black box studio. In the foreground, we see the bare forearms of a performer, their hand resting on the shoulder of another, who is wearing a sunrise yellow shirt. Her long brown hair rests on the fingertips of the first performer's hand. Behind her is a blurred image of an arm, shoulder, and the chest of a third performer, who is wearing a mustard yellow t-shirt. His arm is bent at the elbow at 90 degrees. All three performers are in profile, facing in the same direction. In the background is a blurred green light. It appears to hover in the otherwise empty black box space. Towards the top left of the slide, in black writing on an orange background, are the words half-light. So I will describe any visual info in the presentation as it occurs. So, what is Half-Light? So, Half-Light is a project that was conceived in 2021 in response to my experiences as both a visually impaired dancer and audience member. From an audience perspective, I often found that my access requirements were either partially considered or not considered at all, and traditional or standard audio description for dance, whilst welcome, felt at times to be limited in its effectiveness and its availability, particularly, ironically, when it came to contemporary dance, which was usually the work that I wanted to go and see. So for those who may not be familiar with audio description or AD, standard AD in theatres is a live verbal commentary delivered by trained audio describers to blind and visually impaired audience members through a headset. The commentary describes the visual elements of the performance in the quiet moments and the gaps in the live event. As a performer, there were few opportunities to create choreography or make work that was born out of different ways of sensing, seeing, or navigating space. And I began to wonder how we might reimagine dance through the lens of visual impairment. How might we truly and more radically decenter the visual and create dance work that was designed first and foremost for blind and visually impaired audiences? Whilst a growing body of integrated audio description was kind of coming into being for theatre and cabaret and circus, where description is, with integrated description, it's where description is interwoven within the script and delivered by the performers, so everyone in the audience gets to hear it. But I was aware that that was happening less for dance. So I thought about what might an integrated performative audio description for dance sound like? What vocabulary might we use? How might we invite an embodied, felt, proximal, and connecting experience? I was interested to know what choreography might emerge if the rehearsal room was held by a visually impaired dancer and maker, and what might occur if we tried to decenter the visual when making performance and dance. So, in 2019, I applied for an ACE Developing Your Creative Practice grant to begin to answer some of these questions and to allow me the time to spend with blind, visually impaired, sighted mentors, artists and makers, as well as experienced contemporary dancers, directors and choreographers. I received the grant, and in January 2021, with funding and support in place, I began the first phase of research entitled Step Change to Making and Directing. I worked with dancers, a choreographer and collaborator Lisa May Thomas, and dancer collaborator Ben McEwen. And I spent time with mentors Maria O'Shoddy, Ben Duke and Vera Tussick, exploring some of these questions. And it was, I think, just to say something about DYCP, the Developing Your Creative Practice grant, which I think is still available to apply for through Arts Council, it was a really rich experience for me to have time to think about who I was as an artist and what I wanted to do next and the work that I wanted to make. And I think it's really exciting to be able to approach maybe like people that you kind of look up to, those kind of mentors or choreographers or artists or people that kind of feel like they've really made it or made something or put something into the world, and to have time with them. So yeah, it was a really rich experience. I discovered some inclusive choreographic methods that I wanted to use and develop further. And I also uncovered quite a lot of new questions and dilemmas as well about how to really make dance accessible, how to work with audio description, and how to create inclusive choreography. In the midst of this, though, this seed for performative work emerged, and I kind of felt really strongly that there was something there that needed to be made. So I applied for Arts Council project funding and a Choreodrome residency from The Place in London. And in the spring and summer of this year, I led the research and development phase of Half-Light. The project was supported by Arts Council England, The Place London, Arnold Feeney, Trinity Centre Bristol, Gather Up, and Pervasive Media Studio. Part 2. So, the aim of the R&D. So the aims were, firstly, to create and share artistic material for a new, inclusive dance work with integrated audio description, something that was engaging for both blind, visually impaired, and sighted audiences. Secondly, to create and test and share sound design that would do kind of a number of things. So the first thing was to create a sonic experience of the choreography and to communicate the textural quality, the movement dynamics, and the location of the performers in space within the live performance. And then the other thing that I really wanted the sound design to do was to offer a sensory experience of twilight and darkness, transporting the audience to the places and the spaces within the half-light world. And then the other aim, the other thing that was kind of really integral to the project, was to engage with and collaborate with visually impaired mentors and peers and audience members. So, how did we do this? For me, it feels really important to say the most important and rich and exciting part of working on the project was working with a team of really skilled collaborators. So everyone that came on board was incredibly generous, really skilled and really up for exploring what this work might be. So we spent 5 weeks in the studio exploring and creating and developing the material for the work, integrating audio description and inclusive choreographic methods. I worked with sound designer Dan Pollard, who's joined us today. So Dan's a sound designer and a composer and a studio resident. We'd worked together before on a previous project, and I was really excited to work with Dan to explore the sonic possibilities for the work. I think it's fair to say that I would often say, I've got this idea and I really want it to sound like this, and I want it to do this, that, and that, without having to kind of know technically how that might occur. And Dan would pick that up and we would explore that in the studio. So it was really rich and exciting process. So Dan used a combination of handheld Bluetooth speakers, and then we had a PA system with 4 speakers in each corner of the room. And there were 4 microphones carefully hidden in the 4 corners of the performance space. And he used those to conjure and create the sonic half-light world, gently immersing the audience in the experience of twilight, absolute night, and a sonic sunrise. So then with the support of our project producer, Katie Noakes, who's also here today, and Mark Golwell from Site Support West, we hosted 3 sharings for blind, visually impaired and sighted invited audiences at different stages of the project. We really spent time curating structured feedback so that at each stage of the project, as we learned what was working for our audiences, that could then inform the next stage of the work. Then we hosted a final sharing at Arnolfini in July of this year, and we shared about 40 minutes of material for a live dance work entitled Half Light. I'm going to show some footage from that sharing in a moment. But just to say something about the work, so the material we shared explored twilight as a shifting sensory landscape and as a liminal space between worlds, a place where memory and time are ambiguous. The work touches on my experience of visual impairment, especially my relationship to nature, and very much influenced by the time I spend out in nature, particularly navigating during that time when the natural light shifts and fades. It contains moments of autobiography and of a relationship between a mother and son. Throughout the piece is woven a poetic, descriptive narrative, which was written and shaped by dramaturg Raquel Messagazafe, performer Douglas Walker, myself, and the Half Light team. The footage that I'm going to show is audio described and is underscored by sound scores from the sharing. So this includes soft undulations, the soft undulating sound of unison, the dynamic sounds of bodies in motion and feet sweeping the floor, and through handheld speakers, a moment of sustained warmth from the sonic sunrise score, which ends with the call of a songbird. I think it might be a blackbird, but I'm not sure. So yeah, could we play that trailer now, Laura? So we might just need a moment to get that set up.
A title appears. White writing on black background. Half-Light Research and Development, July 2023. We begin in darkness. There will be a slow fade to the close-up of Douglas Walker as he reads from a tablet. As he describes the space, the camera switches to the performance space from his point of view. 3 performers stood at 3 points of the ellipse. They wear loose layers of clothing in amber, ochre, and gold.
Welcome to Half Light at the Arnolfini. I'm Douglas, an average height man with pale skin, hair that is more or less brown, eyes that are more or less green, and a moustache that is simply more. At first glance, one might think I'm a medium, but in truth I am a large. My mother describes me as barrel-chested. Some of you may be here for the touch tour. The thing is, there isn't going to be one. We thought about doing a touch tour, but as it happens, there isn't actually anything to touch. The set is simply this elongated circle where we are all sitting, and we will call this the ellipse. The places that we will travel to, they will be conjured in your imagination, through the poetic description and textual sound design.
3 dancers come into view. Eyes closed, they face the camera in a triangle formation. Holly at the centre, Kip and Linzy on either side and slightly behind, each with a hand placed on Holly's shoulder.
They step forward together. Feet sweep softly earthward. Step side together. right feet circle a quarter turn facing north.
Close-up of Holly's arm sliding onto Kip's shoulder. He lifts her. She is curled up and into him. They are captured floating in darkness. Close-up on Douglas's face reading, which fades into a duet.
As the geometric centre of the sun moves from 6 to 12 degrees below the horizon, our daytime activities become curtailed. The outlines of objects remain visible to us, but all the details are obscured. The horizon itself is still barely visible. We are in nautical twilight.
Linzy and Kip press their full weight into one another. They fall, spin, recover, find each other again. Shifting close-ups of bare arms and hands moving hand-held speakers in space. Pan out to 4 performers forming a line. They approach the audience, surrounding them with sound. The camera moves among the shifting sounds, silhouettes crossing. The 4 performers gather in the centre, peel out into a line again, their backs to us, and slowly approach another section of the audience as the image fades out. White writing on black background. Half-Light R&D creative team. Artistic director and performer Holly Thomas. Performers and collaborating artists Kip Johnson, Linzy and Holly, Douglas Walker. Sound design Dan Pollard. Dramaturg Raquel Meseguer-Safay. Studio access and choreographic support Laura Danikin, Thomas Goodwin, Deeprash Singh. Additional choreographic support Lisa May Thomas. AD consultants Quiplash. Videographer Chris Lewis Smith. Producer Katie Noakes. Trailer audio description by Raquel Meseguer-Safay and Laura Danikin. Arts Council England, Arnolfini, Gather Up, The Place, Pervasive Media Studio and Trinity. These are mostly black writing on white backgrounds with the pink pop of the Place logo and the multicoloured circles of the Pervasive Media Studio logo.
Thanks, Laura. Thank you. So I just wanted to say something about some of the inclusive choreographic methods that emerged through some of this research and things that we attended to in terms of both choreography and design for the piece at this phase. So when thinking about making the choreography for blind and partially sighted audiences, I worked a lot with proximity. And this is something I do quite a lot in my work. So thinking about how we might physically bring the performers in proximity to the audience, but also how we might use language and description and sound to bring this sense of proximity. We thought about, so with the AD, that the AD is very much sort of interweaved into the choreographic score. So for me, it's part of the choreography. And so the movement, the timing, the dynamics of the choreography all have to attend to and be responsive to the AD, which can involve a bit of toing and froing when you're rehearsing in the studio. We allowed movement to be discovered over time rather than as a kind of snapshot or with the immediacy that you often experience if you're seeing the choreography. And I also considered a lot the idea of foregrounding because there's so many layers in the work and in the way that we're kind of working to provide access and an inclusive experience that we sort of begin to think about what are we foregrounding in this moment? Is it a description of the visual? Is it a sonic experience? Is it the sound of the performers in the space? And then with regard to sort of inclusive design, I wanted to create a seating arrangement that allowed for proximity to the performers, the performers and the audience, but also that the space in front, behind, and around the audience could be available for the performers. I was quite inspired by Vera Tussing's work, The Palm of Your Hand, and Vera actually mentored me during my DYCP. So we worked with an ellipse formation, which you can see in the footage for our audience seating. And consideration was also given to costume. So for this stage of R&D, I really just wanted to think about trying out wearing colours that were both evocative of sunset, but also contrasted really well with the blackness of the performance space, providing a good colour contrast for our partially sighted audience members. And then in terms of access and inclusion through the sound design, I mean, we did a lot and we tried lots of different things. But what felt really important to me, and when working with Dan, was that we kind of crafted layers of pre-recorded and live created sound that ensured that all the layers of sound, so the sounds of the performers' moving bodies, the sounds of the space, and the sounds of these kind of immersive environments could all be heard at the same time. So quite often I find in immersive work, interestingly, the sound of the space kind of disappears, and then to try and track the performers through sound, that often goes as well. And I was really keen to keep all those layers of sound in there. So I guess there's a sense that the immersion was a very kind of gentle textural immersion into the sonic landscape. So I wanted to just show one example of the score, a score that foregrounds an audio experience and audio description. So in the excerpt from the footage, this score's called Mother and Boy. You'll see a moment of myself and performer Douglas Walker carrying handheld speakers around the ellipse. And this is primarily an audio score, so you may want to soften your gaze or close your eyes and listen to the audio. You'll hear audio description of the visual elements in the footage, and you'll also hear the pre-recorded audio that was played through Bluetooth speakers in the sharing.
An excerpt from Half-Light Research and Development, July 2023. These images appear out of darkness. A man wanders in the performance space, holding a speaker in his hands. He is surrounded by a seated audience. He is joined by a woman. They come to face one another in the center of the space. They are crouched close to the floor, and she embraces him, her head curled onto his shoulder.
We stand at opposite ends of the ellipse, facing each other. A boy.
And a mother. The light is cold, opaque, and white.
The air is thick, like fog. Perhaps we are on the moors.
Damp moss sits beneath our feet and rests between our toes.
And the air?
It's cold.
And the cold lingers, cold on our bones.
We cannot settle here. 1,000 stories gather in the sky.
The sky is black.
The air is dark.
I think a storm is coming, loud and noisy and dark and bleak.
I imagine the storm is silent. I imagine I can eat the storm. I imagine the storm has passed. I imagine beyond the storm.
And then the rain comes, wet and earthy and full of air.
and we breathe.
A close-up of his hand held in hers. Camera pans to her face.
And slowly we make our way home.
Okay, so I'd just like to play one more moment, which is an audio moment from some sound that underscored a score called Salamander. So this was the moment in which our mother character travelled into absolute night, into the waters of perpetual darkness. And the Salamander character is a matriarch, I guess, and she's based on a real salamander called an olm that lives in perpetual darkness in the waters of caves, and is actually quite endangered due to water pollution. So there's quite a lot of footage of these olms, mother salamanders, in the waters, in the caves. So I was very inspired by some of that footage that I watched. And this sound design was kind of sat underneath the movement score, and we also have moments of audio description over that. But I wanted to just play a moment of the sound design, which came out of as the dancers were rehearsing the Salamander score. They kind of started to embody Salamander and almost descriptively make sounds of Salamander. And I heard it, I was like, that's it. That's what we can use. And then asked Dan to kind of play with that and find this kind of quality of this salamander. And I just wanted to play some of that for you to listen to. I don't know if you noticed, but if you listen really hard, you can actually hear moments of the sort of slowed down voices of the performers. So just to finish, I wanted to read a couple of quotes and responses that we had from our invited audience, and very briefly talk about next steps. So one of our visually impaired audience members said, "I believe you're doing something truly unique here with audio description and dance, helping us audience reconceptualize dance as something that is heard and felt rather than viewed from a distance." And then from Phil Owen, producer at Arnolfini, Phil said, "Half-Light combines a delicacy of means with deeply considered underlying principles, a dance piece, a sound piece, a piece of narrative performance, and an inclusive audience experience, which feels almost healing." So, next steps. So when we think about the next steps, we plan to complete the creation of Half-Light next summer, to work with lighting and costume designers and a theatre director to rehearse the work so that it's ready to show and share and premiere in the autumn next year. And then we hope to tour the work in 2025. So thank you. Thank you so much for listening, for coming along. And I'm really happy. It'd be really lovely to have any questions, any thoughts, any feedback. So Dan, sound designer, is here, and Katie, our project producer, as well. So it may well be that there's questions that they can better answer than me as well.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you.
All right. Who's got a question to kick us off?
Hi.
Yeah, it's working.
It's on, it's good. Yeah, it's really interesting. We're learning about 360 video and spatial sound, or ambisonics, where the sound's recorded by multiple microphones that are pointing in different directions, so then you hear the sound as if it's in a three-dimensional space when it's played back. I wondered if you'd thought about that in your process at any point, or if it's something that you're kind of aware of, or that's the question.
It might be that we might want to ask Dan about that. I think from my point of view, I'm very much like, I just want us to hear the sound in that space at that moment, or I really want us to be able to hear the sound of the dancers as it's occurring, or I really want us to be able to hear moments of sound like feet brushing that you wouldn't necessarily pick up in a performance space. And we also are thinking about kit that we can easily tour as well, so that's sort of part of that. But Dan, I don't know if you want to say any more.
Yes, we quite quickly discovered that kind of keeping it simple was more effective, and one of the ways we found that out was by just trying. I had a piece of music. It was essentially a chord, and I sent 4 different notes to 4 different Bluetooth speakers, and then the performers just moved around with them in the space, so they could go up to people and just surround them. And like, if you just close your eyes and sat there, it just felt really amazing. And I've heard things done like that with ambisonics and binaural, and it's cool, but like actually knowing there's a person there, where you sort of almost forget it's like they're floating. There's something about the physical experience of it felt really powerful, and as a bonus was a lot more simple than a lot of the tech that it would take to reproduce that, sort of just kind of fake that essentially. So we kind of took that idea and then kind of ran with it. And I mean, Holly's choreography already sort of was leaning towards that kind of thing anyway. There's a score called Storm where the performers basically whip up a storm by like creating noise with their feet and just running past you and sweeping their arms so you feel the air move. And so yeah, we were keen to keep it really physical. And and we had we had some wireless mics that we ended up not using because again, it was just sort of overcomplicating things, and we realized the simpler the better. A surround effect that we used was having 4 speakers in 4 corners of the room and having these contact mics on the floor, so they were picking up movement, and just placing the mic next to the speaker that it was sort of being sent to, just again, in quite a simple way, made sure that if you heard the dancer over there, that's where they were, and you could follow them. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Anybody else got a question? I wanted to ask something actually, Holly. So a lot of describing dance is about spatial relationships and so on. And did you find that like there were some kinds of movement which were easier to describe than others?
Yes.
And did that affect what kinds of movement you wanted to put into the piece?
Yeah. And interestingly, it was also affected by what we began with. So did we begin the score with words and description, or did we begin a score with movement and then find the words for it? Yes, absolutely. So there are, at the beginning of the piece, you heard Dougie when he was describing himself and describing the space. So traditionally, you would have that as like a program note over your headphones, delivered quite objectively quite often. But we wanted to kind of integrate that into the work. And then we I was really keen to also describe something called what I call movement signatures. So I find that even when 3 dancers are moving in unison, there's something about their movement and who they are that enables me, if I can't see them clearly, to still know who's who. So we had a moment where we described our movement signatures, how we tend to move, where our bodies are drawn to, and we sort of showed that physically. So I tried to kind of front end some of the description in that way. And then there were also certain moments that, like quite small details that were often hard to describe, like when we put our weight into one foot, we shifted the other foot back, and so that the ball of the second foot was behind us, and we're just putting a little bit of weight into that. and then we crouched. So we described that in more detail at the beginning, and then we shorthanded. So we called that movement poise. So we said, this will happen when you hear that, we will describe that as poise. So there was certain kind of fuller descriptions at the beginning that then we could refer to the shorthanding and shorthand words. And that's something that is kind of used quite a lot in integrated audio description, and I think it's super helpful so you're not overwhelmed with description. And there's also times when the movement, in terms of time, the movement has to stretch itself out to give time for the description. So this is the toing and froing, and there's times when the description has to be super concise to work with the movement. Yes. I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely, yes. Beck.
Hi, Holly. I really love it. It's so beautiful.
Thank
I was
you.
really interested in what you were saying about the colour scheme of the dancers and how you'd kind of intentionally put them in this kind of yellowish colour with the black space. And I was just wondering, because it feels like it is a very sound-driven, physical performance, whether anybody, if that kind of registered with people, if anything about that colour scheme came back in the feedback at all. I think it's really interesting, because I think I've thought about that a lot in terms of print or kind of web-based colour schemes, but not in terms of a physical performance. So I was just wondering whether anything kind of came back to you about that from the people who experienced it.
That's really interesting. I don't remember anybody specifically picking that up in the feedback. However, I've had a lot of experiences in other work where I've been an audience or there's been other VI audience members, and it tends to be the other way around of like, when, I don't know why, but in some contemporary dance there's a real thing about dressing people in really dark colours against a really dark background with really like challenging lighting. And then I much more hear people, you know, not actually just blind and partially sighted people, but other audience members too, saying it was just really hard to see the people moving, the dancers moving. So I've heard that feedback more than we got anything specific back. I don't remember us having anything specific about that, Katie.
We didn't have any specific feedback from the audience.
So Katie, can you use a microphone? Otherwise, the people on the internet are getting silence.
Yeah, we didn't have any like specific access feedback from the audience, but one of the pennies that dropped for us during the final sharing was that actually, although we kind of, you know, we always think about the black box, because the performers were in the middle of an audience, actually what they're performing against is all the colours and patterns of whatever items of clothing the audience are wearing. So we haven't quite squared that circle yet. But
I think because we had by what's really interesting about when you kind of shift space for access is like the whole of the general kind of way that lighting works in the spaces, or if it's kind of like a preset, is that it lights the whole of the space. So by bringing the audience in, suddenly they were lit. And we were like, okay. So I think for the next phase, working with a lighting designer, and we've already spoken to a lighting designer about this, how we work with the lighting so that the audience aren't lit. Because as Katie said, it was suddenly like, oh, there's actually this other visual busyness now within the space. Yeah. And we did have a comment, I don't know why that made me think of it when you asked that question, but we did have a comment. I was really interested that a few of our visually impaired audience members asked about socks, and they were saying, when were you wearing socks and when weren't you? Because you didn't describe that, and I could really hear a difference, and I didn't know if someone was wearing shoes at one point, and it sounded like some of your pre-recording, you were not wearing socks, even though you were wearing socks in the work. Like, it was a real detail of listening that I hadn't considered. And I've never had quite so much feedback about socks, but it made me really like key into, there's, you know, we're using the soundscape of our feet in really different ways. And there were moments when we wanted to hide the sound of the performers because, like, for example, in the sunrise, it was about the sound of the sunrise. We were choreographing the moving sound in the speakers, so then we wore socks and was quiet as we could be. Yeah, and it was just interesting how the detail of what was picked up around that. Yeah.
Anybody else for a question? Oh, yeah.
Hi, Holly. That was really fascinating. When you spoke about doing the DYCP and the moment where you realised there was a project that was being born out of that, you said there was a moment where you realised you were going to apply for funding for a project. I wondered if you would speak a little more on that. Like, where did the initial idea, at what point did that surface?
What point did it come? That's a good question. I think there were two things. So one was, so I'd had this thing in my head for a long time about unison, and I really noticed that when dance and movement opportunities were provided or for blind and partially sighted performers around movement, that it was always often around improvisation, which is beautiful, and somatic practices, but there was very little opportunity for certain like technical, access to technical class. And one of the things was around creating unison. I love unison. I think it's really beautiful. And I think actually when people in our daily lives, when we use sighted guiding, so that's, for example, when someone fully sighted guides you in a space that you may be unfamiliar with, there's a real sense of tuning in and unison in that. And I really wanted to find that. I really wanted to find, how do we find unison in a way that is really accessible for me and comes from my experience of moving in the world. And I didn't know how it would work. And I was working with two sighted dancers. And I felt this moment of like, this is about people coming into my space now. And we began to find this tuning in of moving in unison. And then we worked for long enough that we were able to then step away from each other, work with eyes closed, and still keep the unison pattern working. And there was just something in it that I just felt like, this might be interesting to share. So that was one moment. And then alongside that DYCP work, I was also separately doing something called a kinship practice, which is something run by Thomas Goodwin, who supported the project as well, and which was about connection to nature. And at some point, those two practices somehow came together, and I was like, I think there's something that maybe could become a piece of work. So I think that's how it was.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yep, go on. Down the back. Thanks.
I also found, I really did find, I'm a fully sighted person, but I have some other sensory sensitivities, and so it was quite interesting for me to be pulled into sort of another sensory space. And I also work on access to theatre. And so one of the things I was interested in, because one of the pieces I put together was starting to try and use different sensory experiences within one sort of show. How did you envision or design the kind of transitions? Because I noticed there's quite a lot of different kind of feels and transitions within the piece.
Yeah. So my honest answer to that would be that I kind of work very much like a collage artist. So I had these kind of different scores. And I guess I worked in the studio with the team to really start to find what are these transitions. And I would say we're still finding them. We haven't found all of them. But I think this sense of foregrounding felt really important. Like, what are we foregrounding at this moment, and how do the other methods that we're using kind of support that? And when that wasn't clear, there was just too much. I don't know if you have a similar experience, but it's like, it's wonderful to work in these different ways, but if you just throw everything in together, it's just too busy. Yeah, and I think as well, as the sound design developed, it was, I guess it's about space. As the sound design developed and the narrative developed, and I asked people to listen, to be in the space and listen, and I felt it myself. It's like, we just need to give that space on its own, you know. And so something like the sound of the rain, which I don't know how well you could hear it at the end of the mother and boy score there, but in the space, there was a moment, and I was saying to the team, we just need to really just be in that rain and hear it and hear it and hear it. And somehow that kind of allowed that score, I think, to kind of resolve. And then there was space to shift to something else. But that, yeah, it's a real learning of like spreading out time and space or something, I think.
I thank you so much. So the audience feedback I got from my piece was that, yes, it was too overwhelming and too busy. So that's really fascinating to find that you start to think of methodologies and ways around that. Otherwise, the audience was finding it overwhelming, basically.
Yeah.
Anybody else for a question? No? In that case, I think we'll say thank you to Holly.
Oh, thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
All right, so before you all go, if you do want to stick around in Hot Desk today and find out more about what we do, please come find one of the studio team. Studio team, give us a wave. A few of us here. We'll be happy to help. If you're watching online, drop us an email, studio@watershed.co.uk. Any questions? We'll do our best. Thank you all for being here today, and we'll see you all again same time next week.